All right. I sat through this presentation about a week ago. Our school resource officers, Lacey Karras and the chief, I think, organized it both, and it was very good. And you know, I think Bob will get some vindication from this. The amendment, the way I see it, we're not here for debate. They're going to present once I introduce them on what's the amendment, what it's going on to the ballot. So what I see is it needs some teeth that you've been talking about, Bob. The way the amendment reads right now, there's not enough teeth. But there are people that need this medical marijuana, and that's what I let them do the presentation, and then maybe you guys can speak together on it. But that's what I sat through. But there is a need for it, I feel, personally. But at this time, I'd like to introduce Brenda Hedinger from the Mahoning County Alcohol and Drug Addiction Services Board, and Angela McClellan. Thank you for waiting so patiently, and it's a great presentation. Please, everyone, pay attention. Keep talking down so she can speak. I asked her to condense it to about a 15-minute presentation, and then we'll ask some questions if there are any, then we'll bring our state rep up, Bob Hagan. You got the floor.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thanks to the mayor for inviting us. We really appreciate the opportunity to go out and talk to voters in Mahoning County regarding this proposed constitutional amendment and what some of the proposed medical marijuana laws would mean for our community. Currently proposed in Ohio, there are three: the Ohio Cannabis Rights Amendment, the Ohio Alternative Treatment Amendment, which they have chosen to put on hold for a short while, and the Ohio Cannabis Protection Act, which would be complete legalization, and they've decided to put that on hold till at least 2015. House Joint Resolution 6, which was introduced by Representative Hagan, was for legalization. It received up to its third hearing, but did not move further in the House, but it can be reintroduced at any time. The Ohio Cannabis Rights Amendment is the main focus of the conversation that we're out having with people, mainly because it's legalization of medical marijuana, but it is currently approved by the Attorney General. They're in the process of collecting their 385,000 plus signatures. They have till July to do so, to put it on the ballot in November of this year, November of 2014. As you can see, in 3 of the counties, they've already collected enough signatures. Those are the red ones. And in the counties with stars, they have team captains collecting signatures. That's the Ohio Rights Group, who is supporting this. From their webpage, Ohio in 2014, U.S. in 2016, as goes Ohio, so goes the nation. So that is one piece of their of the marketing. The Ohio Cannabis Rights Amendment makes it a right for any eligible citizen to have the right to use medicinal marijuana. That includes, that places people in a protected class, as most attorneys will tell you, and the way it's written, it talks about non-discrimination in the workplace. So we would be dealing with a protected class of citizens who have the right to smoke marijuana for medicinal conditions. They have 20 specified conditions currently in the legislation. The list finishes with "and others as added by the Cannabis Commission." The Cannabis Commission is appointed by the proposed constitutional amendment, made up of 9 members, 6 of whom are appointed by the writers of the amendment, 3 of whom are appointed by the governor unless he doesn't do that in 90 days, and then all 9 would be appointed by the writers of the amendment. They will then set the rules or be able to add conditions to this list of 20. All your slides are in your handout, and if you have any questions, when we have to answer them. I know the print's a little small and it's a little far away. The Ohio Cannabis Rights Amendment, this is very specific language out of the amendment, but I won't read it to you tonight. It prohibits metabolite testing for proving impairment by marijuana. Metabolite testing is how we currently test for marijuana. It is what your body breaks the original entity down into. So it's what your body breaks the cannabis down into. It's what we test for when we do a urine test, a blood test, or a hair test. The Ohio Cannabis Rights Amendment eliminates the ability to use that as a proof of impairment. So what does that mean to employers? If you can't use a drug test, to prove an employee is impaired and they're hurt on the job or they cause injury to others on the job, what does that mean to employers? Again, the amendment does not spell this out. This has not been tested legally, so we have to figure out what that's going to mean down the road. So is the employer responsible if their employee was using medicinal marijuana at the time of an accident in the workplace? What does it mean for law enforcement? Law enforcement will not be able to use urine test, hair test, blood or saliva tests to prove impairment of a driver. Those will not be able to be used to prove impairment if the driver is an eligible citizen under this constitutional amendment. Again, this is a constitutional amendment to the Constitution of Ohio. What does it mean for businesses? The constitutional amendment does not specify where dispensaries can be located. Now, I use the word dispensary and it's in quote very particularly because dispensaries are not discussed in the constitutional amendment. In this proposed amendment, it simply says that you have the right to use medicinal marijuana. It doesn't say who will grow it, where it will be grown, how much you can possess, or where it can be purchased, or how that purchasing system will be set up. That will be left to the Cannabis Commission to set those rules after this is added to the Constitution. There is also no stipulation in the Cannabis Rights Amendment talking about will advertising be allowed or where will it be allowed. So will your family be exposed to signage, what kind of signage will be allowed, and where is all left open. The Ohio Cannabis Rights Amendment does allow for hemp. Hemp is a non-psychoactive cannabis plant. It's great for materials, it's great for fabrics, it's very strong. Again, it doesn't specify how much can be grown, where it can be grown. The Cannabis Commission will set those rules. Do Ohioans support marijuana use? When Ohioans were asked in 2012 whether they supported legalization of marijuana, it was about an even split, 47% positive, 47% negative. But when we add the word medicinal and it becomes do Ohioans support medicinal marijuana, the Cincinnati Institute research shows that it goes up to 73% of Ohioans are for it. So as soon as you add medicinal, it changes public perception. There are currently 18 states, 2 with recreational, the others with medicinal. For those of you who are geographically challenged like I am, I did include a list of the states that are both medicinal, and then on the bottom, the 2 that are also recreational, which is Colorado and the state of Washington. In Mahoning County, we conduct a PEP survey. Every 2 years in the schools, we conduct a survey of all 7th, 9th, and 11th graders through the Coalition for a Drug-Free Mahoning County. The last survey, we're just getting ready to do this year's survey, and just got them counted and ready to go in our office. But from the 2012 survey, 11th graders, as you can see, 18.04% have said that they used marijuana in the last 30 days, and they plan to use it in the next 30 days. So that is already almost 1 in 5 11th graders in Mahoning County are smoking marijuana. So what does the Ohio Cannabis Rights Amendment mean for students in schools? It gives the right for people under the age of 18 to be eligible citizens as well, as long as they have one of the 20 conditions and parental permission. So if they are school-age children and they are able to attend school, what will this mean for the schools? Will the schools have to provide a place for a student to dose or an employee? Even if we're not talking about the students, we're talking about teachers, school bus drivers, custodians, office workers. Will the school have to provide a place where they can take a dose of cannabis? Will the school be responsible for them after their dose of cannabis? And for those of you who are familiar with public schools right now, a child isn't allowed to hold their own aspirin. So who holds the dose of marijuana or cannabis, whether it's in a consumable form or a smokable form? Let's assume it's a consumable in the schools. Who holds it? The school nurse, the school principal? How's that going to be secured? How's it going to be handled? If it's in the lunchroom, how does the lunch monitor know what the child is eating and whether it's eligible? Will school personnel be allowed to dose in the evening, on the weekends, on off-school hours? What will that look like, and what will the school's policies have to be? All drug-free workplace policies will have to be rewritten from top to bottom. What does it mean for business? Kind of the same thing. Again, we're just talking about a business. Drug-free workplace policies have to be rewritten. Will the employer have to allow an employee to dose on the clock? Will they have to allow an employee to dose after hours and on weekends or non-work hours? Where will an employee be allowed to keep a dose in the workplace? Can it be at their desk? Will it have to be in a locked cabinet? All of those rules will have to be determined. The other question becomes, what constitutes discrimination? The Ohio Rights Group Constitutional Amendment specifies that these eligible residents cannot be discriminated against. So again, that becomes, what is discrimination? Will an employer be able to ask a potential employee whether in fact they are an eligible resident? Most likely not. Under current discrimination laws, that will probably be not allowed. Then Wall Street Journal printed an article in August of this past year that medical marijuana litigation poses a risk to employers. Employers in the western states that are already dealing with legalization are paying anywhere from $69,000 to $107,000 just to defend the discrimination case, and that's before any judgment is given. What does it mean for the community? It's the same kind of questions. What kind of advertising will we be exposed to? Where will purchase points be allowed to be located, or dispensaries? Will people be allowed to smoke in public places? The only wording in the constitutional amendment is that you can't smoke where it's illegal to smoke a cigarette. So where will you be able to smoke? Right now you can smoke a cigarette in a public park or a public place as long as it's an open air situation. And how much advertising will be around? Again, every county, city, municipality, township will be scrambling to write local ordinances on where dispensaries can be located, if we're going to have dispensaries, and what those local ordinances around signage and exposure will be. So that is the gist of it. We're out talking to people, talking to voters, so that they understand what this constitutional amendment currently states. And it would be a constitutional amendment. Any changes to it would require another complete vote of the voters in the state of Ohio. So it could not be changed or adjusted by legislatures. So they would be stuck with that. All right.
Bob Hagan, go ahead. Come on.
Bob, you gonna pass out samples?
I'm going to tell the police officers that when I went to the committee to talk about the marijuana, the legalization of marijuana, the one that we put on the ballot and let everyone make that decision, irrespective of the legislature, because they're so slow. I told one of the committee members, asked me, how can you ever tell if a police officer pulls someone over, how are they going to be able to tell? Because they don't have a test. They have one for alcohol, but they don't have one for marijuana. So I told the committee member, the best thing to do is hold a bag of carrots and M&Ms. If they go for the M&Ms, you guys are slow, really slow. Most of you have not smoked it, I can tell. I want to talk about two bills. I want to talk about the two issues, because I think it's very important that you hear exactly what I did. Because I have introduced two bills. One was the medical marijuana bill. The other was the bill that would go out to the voters and let them make the decision. I thought it was very important to allow the voters to make the decision because, in fact, so many other states are doing it, and we're missing the opportunity to get an incredible amount of taxes from this. Some of these states are making an incredible amount of money. Anybody, and even the police officers know this, the longest war we've ever had is the war on drugs. And we lost it. And we're losing it. We're spending billions and billions of dollars on a losing cause. So I really thought it was important to let the voters decide in Ohio whether they really want to do this, legalize it, tax it, and do whatever they want about making sure, except if they had to go out and get it on the ballot. My interest, my biggest interest, is the medical marijuana bill. And I'll tell you why. Because I had people rolling to my office who had MS, who were suffering, people that had debilitating diseases that really wanted help. They had tried all the drugs, nothing could help them. They were worried about having to move out of the state, go to another state. 20 other states have already introduced and passed medical marijuana. And then, last year, I met a couple of families that had young kids that were suffering from epilepsy. Young kids, one was 5, another was 4, were suffering terribly. And I watched the special, and all of you should go and watch this, because it really isn't funny. One part of it, the recreational, we can joke about. Medical, I'm not joking about this. There are medical uses for it, and CNN did a study, and I urge all of you to go and look at that study. When Dr. Sanjay Gupta from CNN, who was absolutely opposed to any use of marijuana, including medical marijuana, did his study, a 6-month study, and he went to Colorado, and he looked at these young kids and older people as well that were suffering seizures, and they gave them the portion of the marijuana, not the THC. You're not going to let kids smoke pot. But they gave it, and they put it on their tongue, mixed with olive oil, by the way. And these kids that were having 100 seizures a day dropped down to less than 10. Now, could anybody in this room ever say that you would not allow a child who is suffering the seizures and parents who are suffering an incredible amount of agony watching their kids ignore that responsibility? No, I don't think anybody would. And nobody in here should ever deny the fact that we want to make sure that these kids are taken care of. Now, in regards to this, here's what my problem is. I'm an elected legislator, 28 years in office. When we allow legislation to go beyond the legislature, now we're having problems with the determination of people making decisions that we may find troubling. So if we introduce this legislation in the House, and they introduce it to the people outside, where does the control go? She just mentioned something very seriously. You need to pass another constitutional amendment and getting close to 375,000 signatures. Why not pass it in the legislature that I've served in for 28 years? Why not allow us to have the control over on it? We could change it in 1 year. We've passed bills in 3 days. All I wanted to do was to make sure that we passed legislation for medical marijuana that would take care of these kids, take care of people that need it, making sure that it was controlled by those of us that understand it, from the Department of Health down to the Mahoning County or the Youngstown Department of Health. And we would be the ones that would administer it. We would be the ones who would take care of those kids. We would be the ones that would make sure that it was controlled. We would be the ones who could, in fact, if we were allowed to tax medicine, be able to get something out of that. So that's what my objection. Now, the Ohio Rights Group has every right under the Constitution to go around the laziness of this legislature. Because it is horrible when I sit and talk in a committee and people do ask some very stupid questions, but they're not willing to pass this kind of legislation. When 73% of people are for medical marijuana in the state of Ohio, and I've said it over and over again, they won't do it. When I say to them, if your parents are lying in bed full of morphine and they can't stand it anymore and they need something else to eliminate that pain, every one of my conservative colleagues said the same thing. Well, I would do anything for them. Well, would you give them marijuana if that was the only thing that could help? Well, yes, I would. Then why won't you vote it out in the Ohio legislature? Because it will kill me in my district. So that's what we're dealing with. There's an issue about the Constitution. There's an issue in the legislature. And all of us have to understand, the reason why many of us are doing this throughout the country is to make sure that these young kids are taken care of, grown-ups with chronic pain, people that have been suffering, individuals that really desperately need help. And that's why I've been doing it, and that's why I think we should join the 20 other states. Thank you very much.